thank you everybody for being with us today, especially at the time of the year and after so many COP webinar. However, conscious of it all, we prepared something a bit special for you. We have 8 panelists today who will share their view, and most of them are the youth. So it's I hope it will be refreshing and inspiring. As the white beer testify more of a veteran perspective, and I think it's our 9th COP from ALLCOT. In spite of the disappointment from the public sector and the parties' engagement, this COP, from an entrepreneurship perspective, was quite extraordinary because it really shows and confirmed that the private sector has a key role to play into the 2050 goal, the 2030 more short-term goal, and the private sector must rise to the occasion. We were reminded that we are 280 billion tons of CO2 equivalent short to meet our collective NDC, so the 196 countries that signed and committed to the Paris Agreement. Even if we are tremendously optimistic, and it's the nature of ALLCOT, if it's only 25% that needs to be bridged through carbon credits, it's a tremendous amount of project that needs to be deployed. It pushed the reflection on how do we get there. I believe, and most of the ALLCOTAR agree with me, that our limit is essentially funding, but hopefully, as the COP showed, we had a lot of banks and a lot of money participants. So hopefully the smart money will wake up in 2024 and will allow us to display project essentially under Article 6.2, but I leave that for our experts after me. And the second and most troubling one is talent. And it's very important that as a private sector, we work collectively to generate talent, teach, share knowledge, and make sure that more than project developer, we are effectively incubator of agent of change. And I think that's one of the main mission that we should look up, and one of the main conclusion that we take away from COP, it's that capacity building necessity. So without further ado, I'll pass on the baton to Sergi and Diana and my other fellow ALLCOTAR. And again, very grateful. I also take this opportunity to wish you all a happy season festivities and a very sustainable 2024 with a high and implemented ambition for impact, global impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexis, for your words, inspiring as always. So let's start now of setting the stage. What has happened in general in the COP? What are the main starting points that we had right before we started our trip to the Emirates? Arturo, our climate action policy advisor, please let us know what is your view on what has happening in general in this COP28.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for having joined us here in this webinar. So going about setting the stage, so the context for before COP28 occurred. So first, it is important to say that it all started with the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in 1992, a very important convention that settles general principles, the intentions of the countries on the fight against climate change, and the framework of what countries want and have to do in this fight against climate change. because it's only a general convention with a framework regarding climate change. It is, or it was necessary to agree on new legal instrument and other legal instrument to operationalize and make it real with the agreement of the different countries. So in this case, under the umbrella of the UNFCCC, we have seen different protocols, agreements, and other outcomes occurred in the different COPs during all these years. One example is the Kyoto Protocol. We also have the Paris Agreement and other different pacts and outcomes or results of the COPs. These result from negotiations and also are based on scientific evidence and assessments. For example, the reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It is important also to note that COP comes from Conference of the Parties. This is the supreme decision-making body of the convention in charge of reviewing the implementation of the convention and also the implementation of all the different legal instruments decided or agreed upon by the parties. And finally, in charge of adopting new decisions in order to implement the convention and those other legal agreements. During the COPs, many topics are addressed. Some of them that are worth to highlight here are adaptation, capacity building, climate finance, loss and damage, mitigation, market and no-market mechanisms, and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Now, if we see... Now, if we see or we talk about the timeline, it is important to say that as a result of COP3, we have the Kyoto Protocol that brings different mechanisms for the parties in the fight against climate change in 1997. For example, the CDM, Clean Development Mechanism, and the joint joint implementation. After that, with the Doha amendments, the parties decided to establish a second commitment period in 2012 in COP18. Then we have in 2015 the 2030 agenda with the Sustainable Development Goals that have to be aligned with the fight against climate change. The same year, we had COP21 with the Paris Agreement that was signed in 2015, but effective from 2016. And finally, in 2020, in 2021, the second commitment period comes to an end, and the parties in 2021 with the COP26 outcome of the rulebook, Article 6 rulebook, decided on the main rules for the Article 6 to be in line or to be implemented and operationalized. So this is the point where we are at today. After COP26 in Glasgow, we have some rules, but it is important for the parties to continue developing the rules and agreeing on the main terms and conditions to make real the operationalization of Article 6 in general and other topics that are important too. And I'm gonna finish with the critical open matters before COP28, only some of them: loss and damage fund, adaptation fund and global goal on adaptation, climate finance, fossil fuels, global stock take, the first one, and Article 6. Thank you, Sergio.
You're on mute, Sergi. Sergi, you're on mute.
Thank you, the team, for letting me know. As you can see, now we have the presentation has appeared. Sorry for this technical problem. And thank you, Arturo, for letting us know about what are the main points agreed in Glasgow. Let's jump now to the main outcomes. We have, for this opportunity, Paula is going to give us the general outcome overview. So Paula Castillo is our climate action coordinator. Paula, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sergi, and sorry for not having the presentation before and technical problems. But now we have it, and with that, I like to stress, as many of you already know, this week in Dubai, it was the first time that a decision text of the UNFCCC said explicitly that it was the time for transitioning away from fossil fuels in the energy systems, and 127 countries have supported the phase out of not only coal, but also oil and gas, which represents 80 countries more compared to COP27. So, as was put in words of Simon Steele, the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, we didn't turn the page on the fossil fuel area, but this is clearly the beginning of the end. So providing more details on other type of outcomes, we could, for example, dig into the agreements which were reached on regards to tripling the renewable energy capacity. And that included cutting the methane emissions at least 30% by 2030, as well as doubling energy efficiency rate by 2032. This COP also saw how the operationalization of the loss and damage fund took place, and it also made the initial down payments of almost 800 million in parties pledges. In addition, it was the creation of the Just Transition Work Program, and 158 nations signed the Declaration of the Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems, and Climate Action, as well as the Declaration on Climate and Health with 127 signatures. So I've decided to put this blue stripes image on the left side of the photo to show that maybe like an optimistic and hopeful sign of going back to the times of before the Anthropocene, where the temperature was not as high as we unfortunately have nowadays, in contrast with the red one that shows the the temperature records that are being broken every year. And with the open matters at COP, which included, for example, the no agreements to halve oil and gas emissions by 2030, or the adaptation fund that did not reach the 30 million goal, and as well as the lack of details on financing the energy transition, maybe we are in the way of continuing with this dramatic increase of temperature. But there are also other positive outcomes in regards to the global stocktake. This is a milestone to assess the alignment of the short-term actions outlined in countries' NDCs with the long-term climate goals. This text strongly emphasized or anchored nature in the negotiations of the Paris Agreement and other global frameworks, such as, for example, the Convention on Biological Diversity that is going to take place next year in Colombia, the COP16, and maybe this is a chance to build further other links between climate action and resilient food systems or biodiversity with the next COP held in Azerbaijan in 2024. So, thanks.
Thank you very much, Paula. And thank you for giving us some insights of these stripes and connecting those with the future on climate action. It is an honor for us to have the perspectives of the Vice Chair of the SBSTA during the COP28. It's been a very, very, let's say, intense COP, because until the very end, the negotiations were carried out. We have here with us today Nathalie Flores. Nathalie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sergi, and thank you very much to the whole ALLCOT team. My congratulations to all of you for your big efforts along COP, and of course, it's an honor for me to have ALLCOT support through the team supporting the government of the Dominican Republic, following up various negotiations track, and of course, as a public-private partnership with our country. So very quickly, because of course we are running basically out of time, the science and technology body of the convention is it's the body that let's say leads the review of science-based approach text that then the science and technology body passes to the implementation body of the convention. So we have two branches of decisions. We have the decisions that needs to be aligned with the science and technology reports from the IPCC and other systematic observation bodies in the intergovernmental process. And then we have the body that assigns finance into these decisions. And of course, these two bodies passes the decisions to the COP, to the Paris meeting as the Paris Agreement, and to the Paris meeting as the Kyoto Protocol. The preparation for COP28 was very intense. I've been trying to make people understand that this is a party-driven process, which means that these global regulations are driven by the countries, members of the convention. Nevertheless, the conventions and its secretariats needs to ensure that all stakeholders are taken into account in the whole negotiation process. So here I decided to put in this short presentation the commitments that I personally was assigned by the chair of the SABSTA, that in this occasion is from a developed country. His name is Harry Berls from Holland, Netherlands. And of course, I'm representing the developing countries through the seat of the small island developing states. So we have different events around the negotiations itself. And we divided the work from mandated events that the party requests through a global decision to be implemented or be chaired at the conference of the Paris. And of course, we had what happens in the negotiation table. For what happens in the negotiation tables, the chair and I, along the SABSTA coordination unit office of the UNFCCC, we assign work to facilitators and co-facilitators that are parties also represented in the negotiations table. I think for the purposes of this webinar, the most important thing to highlight over here were the mandated events that I carry out on the progress on the update of the development of reporting tools, which means the reporting tools for greenhouse gas emissions, the update on the development of the reporting tools for the biennial reports that we now call BTR or transparency reports, and the updates and the tools of reporting on the enhanced transparency framework. Because now parties, through their NDCs, needs to report their adaptation actions and how this helped them to reduce their emission from mitigation to adaptation. If we can pass to the next slide, please. And the next slide. Yeah. So another important event that I had the honor of taking part was the high-level event on means of implementation for the global stocktake. Here, I had the chance to sit together with the high-level champions represented by the COP27 presidency, the COP28 presidency. Dr. Al-Jaber was chairing this session, and of course, me and the SBI's chair and vice chair, we had the chance to listen to leaders from the whole world on their views of means of implementation. And I wanted to highlight this a specific event because it showed how the world leader sees the negotiation process and how their technical people in the negotiations tables perform the negotiating the regulation itself. So we hear, I personally was there for about 30 minutes of the hour that we sit together with the presidents and the prime ministers from around the world, and all of them were calling for a carbon market approach and regulation for carbon markets. Nevertheless, we couldn't get an agreement on Article 6.4 specifically, which is the transformation of the CDM. And my colleagues in the call will give you more information later. So for me, it's important that you take into account how this COP from the negotiations, the parade part of the COP, as I like to call it, which is the pavilions and all the side events and the World Leaders Summit, like merge, and how and what's the result from that. So the example of the means of implementation from the global stocktake is it's something that we have to look out, and as a citizens, we should talk with our representatives and tell them what our priorities are. And that's why I thank a lot ALLCOT for putting together a perspective of what the market needs and what we need to move forward. We're going to keep the negotiations in Bonn, and we will try to move forward with the Article 6.4 for decisions from Bonn to COP28. Yet, I call you out, all of you, so you can, tell your leaders, your representative, that we need decisions to have the market enabled from the governmental perspective. I will leave it there, and thank you very much for having me and for giving me the opportunity to give you my view.
Thank you, Natalie, for this in-depth understanding of how to happen in the negotiation rooms. I've seen that there have been lots of negotiators out there putting on their best intentions to make an agreement happen. And normally these things are not easy. We have one of the key, let's say, employees of ALLCOT, and also one of the youth voices in this scope, representing Dominican Republic and also the technology approach. Maria Laura Martinez, she's a part of our ALLCOT team, but also working on a voluntary basis to help Dominican Republic to establish the best on how to transfer technology to its country. So Maria Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sergi, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this webinar on ALLCOT's reflection after COP28. In my case, I have the honor of being selected as Youth Technical Lead Negotiator for the Dominican Republic to follow the negotiation of the technology mechanism of the UNFCCC, and at the same time to support the lead negotiator for Article 6, Yanibel Munoz, in this negotiation, especially those in the second week. To drive into the matter regarding the most important findings we can highlight in terms of technology according to the SABSTA, we have improved collaboration between the Technology Executive Committee and the Climate Technology Center and Network, artificial intelligence initiative, especially for those in climate action, highlighting its role and potential challenge in the field, gender inclusion, concern about the yet to be achieved gender balance, and calls for addressing it in the Technology Executive Committee and advisory body. Resource mobilization and partnership strategy, the finalization of the Climate Technology Center and Network strategy for the resource mobilization and partnership for the 2030 to 27 is noted. Financial challenges are recognized, triggering a call for greater support for the technology mechanism mandates, concern about the funding, and especially for the Climate Technology Center and Network are voiced, along with the mobilization for collaborative efforts in research mobilization with the UNFCCC Security and the UNEP. And last but not least, call for reporting process and efforts. The request is made to incorporate updates on the process of efforts related to resource mobilization in the upcoming joint annual report Furthermore, there is motivation for the perceived effort toward advancing technology development, transfer, and the mitigation of gender considerations. Despite our desire for the global stocktake to be more ambitious in terms of technology, we cannot help but note small victories in the following areas. Recognition of technology crucial role in the process to achieve the Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goals, support and process of the technology mechanism in the framework of the work program to 2030 to 27, for addressing global technology challenge, encouraging collaborative efforts to address ongoing gaps and challenge in the global adaptation of technology, and establishment of technology in implementation program to support development countries as Dominican Republic in the challenge of mitigation and adaptation. In that regard, as AOSIS, we are expecting more focused approach on loss and damage, but this is what we have. In general, I wanted to mention that simultaneously, ALLCOT hosts several side events related to sargassum-based solution in the Dominican Republic pavilion, and in circular economy focused on plastic credits in the Dominican Republic and in the Colombia pavilion. To conclude, I feel very grateful for the experience for representing my country and ALLCOT as youth delegate in this prestigious international space, where the most important decisions regarding climate change are made. And I will finish my intervention with this fact. The delegation from Dominican Republic is considered one of the youngest of the UNFCCC Convention, with over 7% of these members being individuals under the age of 25. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Maria Laura. And I think ALLCOT is very well aligned with the Dominican Republic delegation on putting the youngest team, I would say, on Article 6, helping the climate change sphere to put some solutions in place, but also having a gender inclusion in our DNA. It is a pleasure again to present Diana Guzman. Diana is the Global Climate Action Unit Director, and she is one of the main leaders and experts on Article 6 implementation. So I would like to give the floor to Diana. Diana, please let us know what happened with Article 6 during COP28.
Thank you, Sergi, for that super nice introduction. And thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. First of all, before we dive into Article 6, let me just recap what Article 6 is, since I see that there's a lot of participants from the private sector, from different areas of the private sector, or who may not be so familiar with Article 6 and the Paris Agreements as we are. So Article 6 is mainly the voluntary cooperative approaches, which translates into a mechanism from the Paris Agreements for countries to do bilateral agreements and do trades in carbon market areas, which means one country can receive finance from another country to implement a mitigation action and emissions reduction action, and this other country may transfer the mitigation outcomes, which are called ITMOs, into the registry of the finance country. So these are bilateral agreements. Now, we have different sections of Article 6. We have Article 6.2, Article 6.4, and Article 6.8, which is a non-market mechanism. So just giving a global picture of what Article 6 is. Article 6.2 and Article 6.4, both market mechanisms, have the main difference of the rules, of how the rules are set forward. In Article 6.2, there is a free card, we can say, or a free roadway ahead for each of the parties to come together to reach their consensus or their agreements to do their tradings. While Article 6.4 has an overall set of rules set by the UNFCCC, by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, to do this transaction. So this is the main difference. One is controlled freely between the bilateral agreements between one country and another, and 6.4 is more overseen by the Secretariat of the UNFCCC, which implies making rules and making methodologies of how we're going to quantify this impact or in emissions reductions and so forth. So this is mainly the difference between these two. Now, what kinds of agreements? This is what we already had prior to Dubai, and this is what we agreed in Glasgow a couple of years ago when this became operational. Can we can hold on to that slide just for a second, please? Okay, so these are two separate negotiation items, right, which we are going to focus on, 6.2 and 6.4. 6.8, we will leave it for a later webinar for you, because it's our non-market mechanism, and it's also very interesting to see how we can utilize this as a tool to enable climate action. So what was on the table now for 6.2 was mainly technical items, operational items on how we do these transfers and these transactions. While in 6.4, everybody was expecting for the parties or countries to vote or to approve the quantification protocols called methodologies that were already developed or proposed during the summer in Bonn as part of this negotiation process. So all of this talk about not having a lot of progress in Article 6 comes around these two items. Why? Because in Article 6.4, these methodologies were unfortunately not approved yet. These are still in negotiations. It doesn't mean that this is not going to happen, right? It just needs a little bit more work to come forward. But it is still advancing, of course. And we are setting the way, we're setting the pavement to move forward towards this era of using Article 6.4 as the next generation of transactions supervised by the UNFCCC, which comes into line with what we already had from the Kyoto Protocol, the Clean Development Mechanism. So this is a kind of a continuation, something like that, of the Clean Development Mechanism of the Kyoto Protocol, now moving forward with the Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreements. On the other hand, in Article 6.2, well, a lot of little nitty-gritty items and technical items were being discussed and were put on the table. Some things that were not there before appeared during this round of negotiations. For example, Mexico, my country, was talking about putting safeguards and putting a stronger focus on human rights, which many other countries joined in to echo this, especially from the developing parts of the world. So this was viewed upon by other parties and by the entire world, which is observing as something that may hold or may stall a little bit the progress of negotiations, because we are already talking about climate change. So the faster we work, the faster we get together, the faster we negotiate, the faster we can put human rights into question with solutions. So this was put into question. So a lot of other little issues were also placed in the negotiation tables. Things like, when do we authorize? Is it possible to revoke credits that are already issued? Or when should we transfer? What format should we use to report our results? Should we have a supervision or a supervisory body observing the rules that are set forward by bilateral agreements, as we have in 6.4? All of these things were put in the negotiation table. This last idea doesn't, this kind of contradicts the spirit of 6.2, because 6.2 is by definition a no rules by UNFCCC agreement or approach, meaning parties are free to do their bilateral agreements as they see fit, and they can use elements from the voluntary carbon markets to include in their bilateral agreements as cooperative approaches. So this is the whole spirit of this, right? Now, these things none of these items were concluded, right? So we will still keep an eye on during the next year to see what happens with these small issues that the different parties want to talk about in terms of operationalizing Article 6.2. But the main idea here that I want to communicate with our audience is that Article 6.2 is moving forward. So none of these items that I just discussed are a showstopper for Article 6.2. 6.2, we have it in place. We already have a rule book. There might be tiny or little operationalization items that we need to speak about, important ones, and that we as project developers will keep in mind. as a risk mitigation factor when we develop our projects. But the main idea here is that this is moving forward. We already have a lot of investment from project developers, from governments who are moving forward with bilateral negotiations. In fact, at the same time, during the negotiation process, outside the negotiation rooms, in the country, multiple bilateral agreements were announced in the first stages as MOUs, and some of them even finalized. I'm not going to go into detail of what we have here on the screen, but I do invite you to communicate with our team for more developments and for more opportunities and how your particular companies or sectors can be involved in this. And this also, so we saw a lot of actions here in the country pavilions. If we move one slide back, please. In addition to the MOUs, we have another set of bilateral agreements coming into place, or cooperation agreements. So we saw this between developed countries and developing countries, from one area of the world of others. There's a lot of interest in buyers. In fact, we have some buyers here in the participants right now. And the main idea is, look at this action. So this is moving forward in spite of tiny little details being discussed yet. And in Article 6.4, as we said earlier, if we can advance the slide, please, Laura. So in Article 6.4, as we said earlier, the methodologies are still to be discussed. So we will have to wait a little bit to move forward with Article 6.4 projects, but this is okay, right? So these are just methodologies that need to be discussed. This is the same way the CDM, or the Clean Development Mechanism, started some years ago, and it was a very successful mechanism for the Kyoto Protocol. And this is what we're seeing right now for Article 6. So the hopes are high, the stakes are high as well, and the action is there. So this is an opportunity for us to come together to work in these actions. And with this, will I stop my intervention for the moment, and I come back to you, Sergi, for some of the expectations on how we can work together to operationalize these Article 6 and voluntary carbon markets for climate action.
Thank you, Diana, for this very detailed explanation of what happened regarding Article 6. It comes to my mind, and I'm now going to give you a little bit of expectations. So next slide, please. So what we've seen on Article 6.4, basically, on not establishing the methodology, we can see that these already happened in the carbon market. When we had the pre-CDM era, what happened is that from 2005, when the first Kyoto Protocol was established, until 2008, when the CDM was put in place, we had a point in time around 3 years that was called the pre-CDM era. The pre-CDM era, that's when I started to work in this in this world. It happened similarly. What is happening at the moment is that there was no an understanding on how to use the CDM properly, which were the methodologies, and which were the buyers and the sellers. So at this stage, what we can see is that there is a lot of interest from the private sector to finance climate action. And what we can see is that the voluntary carbon market can fill the gap of the supervisory body until we have clear rules for Article 6.4. So Article 6.2 can be as well the, sorry, can you leave? Yeah. Article 6.2 can be basically the front runner of Article 6. And we've seen in this COP very interesting approaches made by different stakeholders. First of all, we've seen that 6 independent voluntary carbon market crediting programs made a joint statement in support of the countries to implement Article 6 to achieve the NDCs. This is a very, very important step. We also have been, we have seen during the COP28 the publication of what is called the end-to-end integrity framework, where you can see how the different actors play a complementary role. And it's interesting to see how the VCMI, the ICBCM, the SBTI, Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and the CDP, which are the key players on the voluntary carbon market, how they interact together and how they are providing this integrity framework. At the moment, what happened or to generalize what happened in Article 6.4 is that the parties didn't want to have a bad deal. And this is because of the integrity issue. They rather prefer to have a no deal rather than a bad deal. And this is because the voluntary carbon market is already experiencing a very bad press, but also a difficulty in implementing the integrity framework. That is what is happening, and that is why it's delay on Article 6.4. We also have seen how the World Bank will be supporting 15 countries, which equates to some 126 million emission reductions in the engagement road map for high integrity carbon markets. This is also very important because it puts in place a very important source of finance. As a main, one of the main points is that during this COP, we've seen that the Article 6, it's very important to operationalize it. It's very important to have a paper or a role in national ETS, as we've seen in Singapore, that, by the way, have put in place already the whitelist from Singapore on the eligibility criteria on Papua New Guinea. They have already established what are their appetite in terms of carbon credits, and this is a very important mover going forward during next year. Finally, Article 6 opens avenues for investments. We've been meeting with lots of investors interested on investing on Article 6. At this stage, we can see that Article 6.2 is already in place to make climate action happen under Paris Agreement. We will need to wait a little bit to have a better established Article 6.4, but our intention is to help to establish a high integrity Article 6.2 projects to showcase what we can do in future. Next slide, please. In ALLCOT, we develop projects mainly, but also we work on advocacy, capacity building, and sustainable strategies. We deliver climate action through projects and solutions with triple I impact: environmental, social, and economical, using the 4 strategies I explained. Next slide, please. As an example of how we implement, we have our climate action unit, which is represented in this webinar. What we do is we support companies and countries while pushing forward the South-South cooperation and promoting active engagement of local communities, facilitating the technology transfer and capacity building. Next slide, please. As a case study, we can see that we've been working for the last year in a waste management program in Senegal that hopefully can be replicated later on in other African countries. ALLCOT has facilitated the private finance to reduce the negative impact of generated waste, not only organic, but also plastic waste in Senegal by selling the resulting ITMOs to Switzerland, transferring technology from Mexico. This is one of the first of its kind projects in Article 6 history, and we hope that this can pave the way to other projects to work in similar approaches. What we can see in this project is that we are developing technology transfer for composting purposes, but also for plastic upcycling. We also are promoting the South-South cooperation by developing or transferring technology from Mexico to Senegal, but also we are engaging the communities by providing organic fertilizer and increasing the quality of food in Senegal. Next slide, please. So this is more or less what has happened in this COP28, and now it's a pleasure for me to introduce you to Sebastián Hernández, who will be give you the final thoughts on what will happen in Azerbaijan in COP29. Sebastian is at the moment is living in South Korea, and he is one of our experts on market in Asia. So thank you, Sebastian, and give us a clue of what will happen in Azerbaijan next year.
Well, thank you very much, Sergi, for those important words. Also, thank you to all my team with the important information you have said in this webinar. I'm gonna pick a little bit of everything that you have said into what to expect of the Azerbaijan COP29. So first of all, building COP28 progress, and the COP29 is going to be a turning point or a shift from from setting goals into concrete implementation plans. So unfortunately, we all know that in this COP28, there were no consensus or no negotiations regarding Article 6.2 and Article 6.4. However, all the governments are really keen to accomplish their NDCs, and they know that they can work by themselves. So they need to gather people, private sector, which private sector are the ones who are the promoters for implementing the sustainable development projects, and they know that they need to work together. So how? With three important tasks, which are aligning with sustainability goals. Second, fostering international partnership. And third, bringing offset opportunities for companies. For example, in Singapore, using eligibles international carbon credits to offset 5% of the taxable emissions from the 1st of January of 2024. This is one of the examples that what we think, what to expect of COP29 next year. So, Sergi, please, thank you. And it's really important to understand that Article 6 in this COP is going to take a very key important role, because as I said, this is going to be a shift from setting goals to concrete implementation plans. So scaling up finance, securing funding from developed countries for developing nations to adapt and mitigate climate change will be crucial. Article 6, it's going to be a very important key role. Article 6.2, private companies are now starting to understand the importance of Article 6. The governments as well are understanding that they can work by themselves, and that in order to do so, they need to, of course, finalize agreements regarding Article 6.2 and 6.4. And we think that unresolved issues around carbon markets and cooperative implementation on Article 6 in the COP29, it's going to be addressed and maybe unlock its full potential for climate action. Thank you, Sergi. And now I'm gonna give like a key takeaways of what my colleagues have said during this webinar. We have like 6 very crucial or important the key takeaways from this COP. So as I said, opportunity for the private sector to enable climate action. The private sector, they understand now that they want to invest, then they want to cooperate with the governments to accomplish their NDC, and also because it's also a business. So it's a win-win situation for everyone. The government wins, the private sector wins, and the climate, we live in a better environmental world. And second, Article 6.2 is moving forward regarding that there were no agreements this year. And as Diana said, there are no showstoppers from this COP28. There's a lot of investment. There's a lot of interesting parties for implementing sustainable development projects and to enable climate action. So we are like opening the path to continue. No final guidance regarding Article 6.4, and we're waiting for the new defined UNFCCC mechanisms. As I said, and we have said in this webinar, there were no final agreement regarding topics of discussions from Article 6.2 and Article 6.4. And as we have said, and also said, countries prefer rather not to continue negotiating on something that maybe is not going to end well. So they stopped, and maybe they're going to continue doing so next year in Azerbaijan. So this is a very important webinar to understand what happened in the COP29. And I give the floor again to Sergi so we can open up the Q&A from the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sebastian, for this wrap up and the overview of what can happen in next COP. We are going to be opening the Q&A session so we can put some ideas and questions from the audience. So yeah, the floor is yours. If there is any questions, I think, Paula, you can enable the questions.
Hi, we already have one question in the Q&A chat. I'm gonna read it. Previous to COP, there was a letter of a group of negotiators complaining about the amount of commissions, events, and topics that didn't really give enough time to discuss the commitments and the real progresses in negotiations in COP in general. Are there any lights of how can we improve this in the future?
I can take that question, Arturo, if you want me to. So basically, the UNFCCC process, as I said before, is driven by the parties. And since Bonn 2023, we've been trying to make the parties understand that when they request a mandated event, clashes with the negotiation process. At the same time, and this is also a personal view as a former negotiator now that I'm vice chair, is that the COP with the whole parallel events or side events, as we want to call them, also makes these commitments clash. So what we are encouraging the parties as moderators of the process is to try to avoid requesting mandated event through the negotiation process or during the negotiation process, and trying to secure funding for these mandated events outside the negotiation process, or at least like a few days before the negotiation process. I had the opportunity to chair a just transition program workshop that was supposed to feed the process of the negotiations of the just transitions, and we had to do it 3 days before of the negotiation process because we didn't secure funding through the decision. So it's very important to understand that when the parties or the group of parties through the consensus process request in a decision a mandated event or put forward a side event because the process enables them to have this, it's the party that requests that. So what we are trying to do from the secretariat and the chairing process is to make parties understand that we need to secure the funding. So usually under this this mandate that developed countries or developed nations should fund these mandated events, even if it's like a workshop to review a research process to then feed a negotiation text, the developed country needs to secure the funding. So this is, something that parties need to come forward with a solution. If it's either like securing the funding in another event, or not having the event itself. So I think it's also an introspection that the countries need to do, because when we have the pavilions, we have the side events, we have the mandated events and the negotiations itself, it's very complicated. I personally like the negotiation process in Bonn because we can literally concentrate in the text, and we tend to move forward more than at COP due to the whole ecosystem that has been put forward by the parties to secure all stakeholders' involvement. I will leave it there.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm not sure if there is going to be any other question, but in any case, we have opened the email address cop28@allcot.com, where you can send us your questions or any comment that you have for us to improve this kind of events. And thank you very much for your assistance. It's 1 minute to the hour, and I hope you have enjoyed these inputs from the COP28. From our team, and thank you very much for your assistance, and I hope you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergi. Just one more comment for everybody. I see that there are other outstanding questions we will not have time to answer, as Sergi just mentioned, but I do want to invite you to reach out to our team, because we do offer trainings with a lot of details on how we can be part of this movement, the climate change movement, as a company or from the private sector, and what are the difference between countries on 6.2 and 6.4. We have all the answers for you, so please reach out and feel free to ask for a training. We will cover customized trainings on these ideas, and looking forward to reach out to your messages. So thank you once again, and Merry Christmas to everybody.
Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.